In this interview, I speak with race engineer Julien Simon-Chautemps, former race engineer for the legendary Kimi Räikkönen. Julien shares his remarkable journey from being a passionate Formula One fan to becoming an influential engineer in the sport. He offers valuable insights on how he navigated each step towards his dream job and the dedication required to succeed in Formula One. So whether you're aspiring to break into the Formula One world or simply interested in motorsport, this episode is full of essential advice and insider tips. And if you're looking for a career in the motorsport industry, be sure to check out hundreds of job listings on fluidjobs.com by Driver61. Julien, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you being here. I guess the first thing to say about you, and probably the thing that you're most well known for, is working with Kimi Räikkönen for 5 years in Formula One, being his engineer. But I suppose where I want to start off is right at the beginning. Where did it all start for you? Were you, were you in your childhood dreaming of working in Formula One or even being a driver? What did that look like?
Well, thank you, Scott, first of all, for having me. So it all started, I remember very well, I was 8 years old and I was living in the south of France and my dad brought me to Monaco Grand Prix. And at the time, even if there was the ticket were less expensive than now, it was still very expensive, even in the 80s. So I remember we were staying in close to the Rocher, we were sitting on the grass basically. So it was quite fun to be there with my dad. And I still remember, and I still have now this feeling of the smell of the tires, the oil, and then the noise of this car running and driving into this fantastic track. And I think that gave me a kind of, I picked up the virus, I think there, from a very young age. So that's, I think that's fair to say that's how he started initially.
The passion grew, and we hear that story quite a lot with people. So I suppose in some respects you were quite lucky to have had your father interested and taking you to the track. But from that point, at which point did you kind of decide or think about an actual career in motorsport? Was that at school and you studied for it, or did it come later in life?
Well, I remember I had a big passion when I was young. Apart motorsport, I wanted to be a fighter pilot. That's always something I wanted to do. But then quickly I realized that having the glasses, it was not very helpful for that. So around 12, I started to have problems with the vision and so on. And then I did some investigation and I thought it would have been impossible to become a fighter pilot. So that was one of my first big thing. But then I always loved cars. I always loved racing and I always loved Formula One since a young age. So I think I would say from maybe 13, 14 years old, I said, okay, let's go for it. Let's do everything I can to get into the racing world. So I knew even though I like go-kart and I like racing, I knew it was not something for me. I was not really interested in driving. I was more interested in understanding the why and the how of the Formula One cars, So everything I did in my career was to set a goal to one day reach F1. And that was not easy because you realize actually you have more people putting you, barrier than people helping you in your career. So that it didn't go without any hiccup. And I can't even tell you the amount of people who told me you will never do it. You will never be able to do that. And it's still happening these days. You know what I mean? And that I think is a big story because never let anyone tell you you will not be able to do it. You cannot do it. You know what I mean? That's a very good life lesson that I've learned and I'm continuing to apply now. But it all developed into searching the right engineering school for me. And living in the south of France, we found a school in Paris where most of the engineering schools are in France. And I found this school that was specialized in aerospace, it's called IPSA. And the good thing about this school is that it gave me some good engineering baseline, obviously, which are important to do this job. but they were forcing us to do quite a long internship every year since year one. You know what I mean? So you were forced to do 2 months, 3 months, 4 months internship every year in summer. So that's how it all started. So they were not really giving you the internship. So they were just telling you have to do it. So
Okay.
each candidate had to find, somewhere to go and work. So me, I started to send hundreds of CVs to various team around. I started in France, and I found this very small form.
Can I just stop you there, Julien? Sorry.
Yeah.
When you're referring to school, first of all, we say school is up to 16 here in the UK. Are you referring to that age, or are you referring to university?
No, university, sorry.
University.
Yeah, so from 18 years old onwards. So,
And to take a little step back from there, in case there's any kind of younger people watching this, how did you decide that you wanted to be an engineer, right? Was it that you wanted to be in motorsport and you felt that you were good at, an early age at engineering? Like, how are you making that decision? Because I remember when I was 16, I didn't have any idea what I wanted to be other than a racing driver. So I didn't really know what to do with my schooling and university.
well, I was lucky to the fact that I always had a good vote at school without working too much. So that was I was quite lucky on that. So I always good grade that gave me, scientific background and these kind of things. But from a very, very young age, as I said, around 14 years old, I always loved, dismounting cars, little model, remounting them, understanding how they work. So I always had a very much an engineering mind, behind me. So, and then when it became clear that I wanted to work in F1, I started to look at what did I need to reach F1. So I did some research. I contacted some engineers I knew at the time I was working in F1 to give me some advice on the school I could do. And nowadays I have like tens of people asking me the same question. So that's why I think it's good I'm sharing my my path into Formula One. And bottom line is that you have to find a school that allow you, a university, sorry, that allow you to develop into Formula One engineer, as simple as that. No matter, I'm a firm believer that the school you do doesn't really define who you are as an engineer. You know what I mean? There is so many different factors. There is a bit of luck as well that is important, but you need motivation, you need perseverance, resilience, all these kind of things that are very useful for to grow into this path to reach F1.
And that's an interesting point, actually, the resilience of it. It's something that I've heard quite a lot in these interviews that we've been doing, is like getting out there, not giving up, giving yourself the best opportunity to be lucky. I mean, you mentioned with the internships there that you'd sent hundreds of letters out. How did you decide to do that? How did you go about that? What did that actually look like in real terms?
Well, at the time we were talking about late 90s or 98 or 99. I don't even remember if we had internet at the time. So yeah, probably we had. I think I was sending normal letter. You know what I mean? I was not even sending email. So it was taking a lot of time, obviously, to arrive, to come back, then phone call. So it was much less straightforward than now. And you just need to insist and you need to put yourself forward. And then at some point, someone will give you a chance. You know what I mean? That's as simple as that. And, you can't force, obviously, team to to hire you, but and I just found this team, a very small team, that needed an engineer to understand this new car they just had, and obviously it was cheap. Actually, I was not costing them anything, so for them it was a win-win situation. So you need to go for it if that's what you want to do. It's very important to do all this internship, because when I reached my first job, actually that was with Prema in 2002, I already had nearly 22 months of experience before starting my first job. You know what I mean? So I was not completely new to what's needed for me to be a good engineer. So that's why I insist it's very, very important. But that comes, obviously, if you talk to a 12 years old, even university might seem a bit far away. You know what I mean? So
Yes. Yeah.
I think you need to go through the process of the college and the school and up to the A level, or the bac in France is called. Go more in the science side, probably. And then once you reach university level, that's where you need to do the good choice for university. You know what I mean? That's where you need to pick up a place that will allow you to grow as an engineer, that has a lot of link to the motorsport industry. And in UK, we are lucky because there are a lot of schools like this that give students this opportunity to go into motorsport, while other countries like France or Italy, they are more generic university. Some are specialized, but there are no motorsports really specialized university that I know of, let's say in France, Germany, or Italy. So
Great. So back to university. You were at university studying engineering. What particular course was it, and how long was that course?
So this university was 5 years. So in France, the typical cursus is that the first 2 years are purely math, physics, science. So it's like nothing to do with motorsport. So it's quite heavy duty in theoretical, let's say, a subject. And then the last 3 years, that's when you start to do some space. You want to specialize in one area or not, you know. So in the school I was, we could specialize in purely aeronautic, aerospace. Actually, a lot of my ex schoolmates now are working with Ariane Space, either in France or in Guyane, where they have the launch pad, or with Airbus in the south of France. And they didn't have a dedicated motorsport, let's say, at the time they didn't have anything specific to motorsport, but I almost want to say it didn't really matter, because what mattered for me is to do the internship and you know, to get into, I was convinced that's what I wanted to do. So my focus was to go through the years basically, and then starting June or July to go with the team and start with them basically.
So you did your degree and you mixed that in with internships. By the time you'd finished your degree, what were you, like 22, 23 years old?
Yeah, something like this. 22, I think, yeah.
And then that was the point at which you managed to get a job at Prema.
So I did something quite good at the time, is that the 5th year in the school I was, the internship was longer. It was 6 months long. And I managed to convince the director of the university at the time, because I found a job opportunity in the States, in Denver, in Colorado, with a guy doing some seminar, which is quite famous in the environment. He was doing vehicle dynamic seminars and data acquisition seminar. And he told me, okay, come with me. I'm starting this seminar company, and you will come to work with me, but you need to come for 10 months. You know what I mean? So I managed to convince my director to miss nearly 6 months of class just to get this opportunity. And the only deal we had is that I had to come back, I think it was in November at the end of the year, for the final presentation, final exam. And he said yes. So he gave me this opportunity that was huge, because when I was there, I was working a lot on theoretical subject on motorsport, but also the guy sent me to Australia to work in Australian V8. We did a little bit of NASCAR Craftman series. So I did a lot of very interesting subject. But then at the end of these years, I wanted to go back to Europe. And then I started to send some CV. And effectively, Prema was the one of the first one who came back to me. And that's how it all started.
Okay, interesting. So that and did you feel that doing the internships were, you know, obviously that they were valuable, right? They're really valuable.
Massive, because one of the things the Prema boss said is like, we receive a lot of email or letter from a candidate, but what stand out from my CV is that I had already done so many internship and so many experience before starting, you know. So if I have one big advice and big recommendation to student now, is to look for this internship. And I know it's not easy, because, you know, there is more and more candidate, more and more application, but be resilient, and one day someone will give you a chance. But that's really the advice I will give: internship.
Yeah, because it's difficult to kind of replicate, I suppose, right? As in the degrees to some degree can be kind of comparable, and you can compare them, and that they could be quite similar. But if you've got someone who's done loads of internships at very varied teams and categories like you did, that must stand out significantly. And it also shows that you're willing to get out there, get your hands dirty. It also shows your type of personality, I suppose, that you're putting yourself in front of lots of people and you're driving this whole thing forward.
Absolutely. I also worked in Spain with the Formula Nissan. I don't know if you remember the early 2000, the Formula Nissan. It was very good. Actually, Franck Montagny, I think, won one of the championship, and it was very competitive, a lot of money there. And also did an internship there, but it was not easy, you know what I mean? And that's another thing I want to say, because I also, that was 25 years ago, and now the people starting in motorsport are very different to when I started, at the time I was working in the truck, we're having a shower in the parking of the circuit. We were not paid. We were like, it's becoming more and more difficult, for people to accept this kind of condition. I see with a lot of young guys going out of university, they want to start immediately in F1, immediately good job, good money, and these kind of things. But for me, it's very important to start in lower series and learn, the business. It's like if a driver was going from karting to F1 directly without going through, F4, F3, F2. So they are very important for an engineer to know the job. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I completely agree, and that's a common theme actually that comes from a lot of the people that we're speaking to. Is you've got to find your way through there, and you've got to start. You've got to start at the bottom. It definitely helps you, even like volunteering for a team, even if it's a club level team. If you feel like you don't have access, go and make that access, because you can still make it happen. Like, you've just got to start at a different level than you might really want to. But also, Julien, I think it makes you a more well-rounded individual, right? You've picked up some scar tissue along the way. You've had your difficulties, and it makes you a better engineer, or whatever role you're going into. It helps.
Absolutely. I mean, my first job was to clean the wheel of the truck. That's when I arrived. So literally, he gave me a spray and a piece of tissue, and I was cleaning the wheel of the truck. And then he received.
Same thing for me. When I was racing, I was cleaning the floor of the hospitality unit. You know, the plastic flooring that you put down. I don't care. It was a good lesson. It's a good lesson.
So you learn from it, and then straight after we had he received this data acquisition in a big box. Put the box on my desk, and he said, "Here we go. Put that on the car. Apparently, that's the next new thing. So we need to have all these sensors on the car and so on." So I was doing basically the mechanic, the engineer, the everything. That was very, very interesting, and I learned a lot of things.
And at Prema, which category were you working in at that point? Was that the Nissan series or a different series?
No, that was we had the European Formula Renault 2 liters. Okay. And then I did the F3 Euro Series.
Okay. How long were you at Prema for?
5 years. 5 years.
Oh, so a long time. And did your role change during that period? Did you kind of move up towards, what I'm trying to understand here is, what did your trajectory look like? You went in at F3, whatever it might be, a lower category, still quite actually, high up professional series. But what was the initial role, and then where did you go within Prema?
I started immediately as a race engineer, because I not only I wanted to work in F1, but I was very specific. I wanted to become race engineer in F1. So that's why all my job always been around race or performance engineer. So I started as a race engineer in Formula Renault 2 liters, and then I moved up category in Prema in F3 Euro Series, which the F3 Euro Series at the time was running in parallel with DTM. I don't know if you remember, but they were extremely competitive. They were not spec cars, so we could design ourselves the wishbone, the flaps, the wing, the suspension kinematic, the damper were free. So it was like a mini Formula One at the time. Yeah. And that was really, really good for engineers or mechanics to learn. Unfortunately, now most of the the junior series are spec, so everybody has the same car, so you can only work on the setup. But in terms of engineering, I remember designing myself a new Ackerman platform on the upright for Macau, where you had to, you need there is an hairpin, a right-hand hairpin that's going down as well, so you needed a lot of steering angle. So we had to change quite a lot the kinematic of the car because of that. So we did that all in house. But as you can imagine, for an engineer, it was great. So and then you put that you make the drawing yourself. I was building the part myself during the weekend, and then fitted on the car as well. So it was a great experience. Really, really, I learned a lot of things during my time in Prema.
And so going into Prema as a race engineer directly, what do you think? Like, that's, for me, that seemed like quite a fantastic kind of. It wasn't the first step, but the first paid working step that you made. Yeah. What do you think allowed you to stand out and get that role and go in at what seemed like quite a high level?
Because I had a lot of experience already. I was coming out of university, but I did a year in USA working on different cars. All my internship were also made with team having Formula Renault 2 liters. You know what I mean? So I already had experience on the car. So that was very appealing for Prema because yes, I was young. Yes, I was going out of university, but I had worked 2-3 internship on this similar car. So for them, they would not have lost time to teach me how the car works, basically.
So you'd actually done all of your kind of fresh hands-on work in your internships, which then kind of shortcutted you when you actually went into paid working.
Yes. So that was very important for them. And it went well because at the time, Prema was also the Toyota junior team. So they had a lot of resources from Toyota to promote the driver and to help the driver. So that was really, really good experience on my side.
Fantastic. So 5 years at Prema, kind of where does that bring us up on the timeline? Now, your first 5 years of work. 2006. Okay. Yeah. So you must have been working with did you work with Di Resta? Was he at Prema? No.
I did some tests with Paul, but he never went to Prema. He went to ASM. Yeah.
I remember I did the McLaren Young Driver of the Year.
Yes.
I did that in 2004 and Paul won and he'd done so much. I drove an F3 car during that test, a couple of days test at Silverstone it was, and a DTM car actually. And he'd done so much testing in an F3 car. It was a challenge. He was quicker than me. Yeah. So after Prema, where did you go then?
So after Prema, I went to Trident in GP2. So Trident was the new team coming in into the category. They had never done any racing before, and they set up a new team. And that actually at the time it was Alessandro Aluni Bravi, the managing director of this team, and he pushed me out of Prema. Alessandro is now the team representative of Sauber, so I've known Alessandro for for many years, and he pushed me from Prema basically. So and he offered me a nice position in Trident, and there I was a kind of the Perfo, senior Perfo. I was not at a race engineering position because obviously the step from Formula Renault, Formula 3 for GP2 was quite big. And basically that's how we decided. And for me, I was happy to learn from there. Also, they had recruited some guy from F1 at the time, and I learned a lot of things with this person. And I'm still friend with him. The guy had done nearly 10 years in F1 when he arrived in Trident. And I learned so many of the process with him. So that was really interesting for me as an engineer.
So what was the specific role if it wasn't race engineer?
Performance engineer. So I was in charge of the data, of the setup, of the mapping. So that's the first step before race engineer, basically.
So I suppose actually just for people listening, if they're not aware, what's the difference between a performance and a race engineer?
Well, in all the categories, more or less the same. So the race engineer is basically the guy talking to the driver on the radio. In F1 is a big role because not many people are allowed to talk to the drivers, only the race engineer. It's also it's a bit like the manager of all the engineers working in the car. You know what I mean? So during a session, you will have the performance engineer, the tire engineer, the engine engineer, the electronic engineer, all filling him with information to get the car quicker. And the role of the race engineer is to filter off this information, to pick the good part or remove the irrelevant part, and to give to the driver the information to go quicker. So that's during a session. Then back in the office or back in between the session, you go through the data with your drivers, and you discuss about setup change, how to make the car quicker. So that's really the race engineer job. And he's using all the specialized other engineers to help him in his choice. While the performance engineer or the data engineers, as it's called sometimes, is a kind of the assistant of the race engineer. You know what I mean? So he doesn't speak directly to the drivers, even though in some teams it's a bit different, but he's basically more focused purely on analyzing the data, simulation work, setup simulation, mapping work. So he's less involved in managing the mechanics like the race engineer does, or managing the other engineers. You know what I mean? So race engineer at this level is more like a manager of mechanics. Is doing the job list for the mechanics, job list for the engineers, while the performance is fully focused on the vehicle dynamic performance of the car, data analysis, video analysis. But is the step usually performance engineer that don't want to stay as performance for long, so the next step up for them is race engineer.
Okay, so from your kind of career choice perspective, you chose to move up, I suppose, to GP2, as it was called then, but kind of come down slightly in someone's mind to a performance engineer, with the idea then to move back up again to race engineer.
Correct. That's exactly the step I did.
And so when you were the performance engineer at Trident, how long were you in that role? And then what was next in this story?
10 months. It was very short. So we had Pastor Maldonado as a driver. We won Monaco in 2007. So we had some good results. And then straight away, I was in contact with some F1 team. And again, like I did at the beginning of my career, and that's important for the audience, I knew I wanted to go in F1. So I kept pestering people I knew. And at the time, I knew a lot of people from Toyota simply because of the link between Prema and Toyota. They had a lot of ex-engineers from Prema, which I had contact with. And I kept calling them, emailing them, and say, please, can you give me a chance? Please, can you give me a chance? And then at some points, I remember it was, I think, September or October 2007, I got a call to go in Cologne to do an interview. And I arrived super prepared. I had made a PowerPoint presentation of the job I was doing. And bear in mind that GP2 at the time was it was a high level, not as high as now, but it was still a very decent level. And I was working with this F1 person who helped me a lot with the process and so on already using F1. So I arrived super prepared to this interview, and the guy read it and I say, that's great. And they offer me a job immediately, basically. So I started I had a very short notice period. I think I had a couple of weeks only. So I did a meeting with the owner of this GP2 team of Trident and say, I'm sorry, but I got this opportunity in F1. That's what I wanted to do. And the job in F1 was performance engineer in the test team. So if you remember, at the time, F1 had fully crewed test team. And for me, it was perfect to learn and without the pressure of the race. So it was a great opportunity, which I decided to take.
I think the moral of the story so far is it's definitely step by step, but with a direct focus on where you want to end up. But know that there are steps in between. you obviously moved quite quickly. But although you spent 5 years at Prema, but then obviously you after that point you moved quickly to Formula One test team, not the race team.
Yeah.
But then I think the other thing, Julian, that I think you're very good at is the networking, staying in contact with people, pushing yourself forward with that. And then just being ready when the opportunities present themselves and making the most out of them. Because to go with a deck and a presentation to a Formula One team and present to them, you're going to stand out and you're going to show, again, the mentality that you have to go above and beyond. And I think that mentality is incredibly important.
Absolutely, you're completely right. Is showing how prepared you are. I think it makes a huge difference compared to all the candidates I had. But also the fact that I'd done so many years, in Formula Renault, Formula 3, GP2 internships. So I had many, many years. That was appealing for them because they say, okay, this guy is he's young. I was 28 at the time, but he had many years of experience racing already, so they were very attracted by this kind of profile, basically. And
so then you're on the test team at Toyota as a performance engineer. Was the testing unlimited at that point, or was it limited to?
Pretty much so, yeah.
Yeah, crazy. And so what did the career at Toyota look like, and what then led to the next step?
Well, it went very quick because I arrived in November 2007, and then I think at the beginning of 2008, the FIA changed the rules, and they wanted to remove the possibility of the team to have a test team. So basically, from 2008 onwards, the test team was not allowed anymore for cost reason. And then immediately at the same time, they offered me, they had basically one of the performance engineer in the race team was going up to race. So they had I was lucky that they had an option for me, an availability to be performance engineer in the race team. And after 2 months I started, they told me, how do you feel to go in the race team immediately? And working with Jarno at the time, Jarno Trulli. And I say, well, let's go for it. Why not? So I didn't stay long in the test team. But also because they saw that the few months I did in the test team, I believe they saw was quite good. And I said, okay, there will be no problem for the transition into the race team. And then I did 2 years in a race team. And then Toyota decided to shut down the F1 program, if you remember.
Yep.
So then I had no choice. They made redundant something like 800 people or something like this from one day to another. So I had to find something else at this time. But I stayed a good 2 years, a bit more than 2 years in Toyota.
And I guess in terms of the story, that's having a little twist like that, where actually, because up until that point, your career just went, we would say swimmingly in English, it was step by step, bang, 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 bang. But then Formula One teams, unfortunately, come and go every now and then, or some of them do. So you'd got a great job, you then lost it. What was your next step? How did you pick yourself back up again?
I remember I was very depressed, like another 800 people, I think, in the factory. Yeah. I remember the call. They all brought us to a huge warehouse they had at the back of the factory in Cologne. There were all the people there, and they start with this awful presentation on, okay, so we're going to shut down the program. And they went straight away into the admin stuff, like, okay, if you have been 10 years in the company, you will get 20% of the salary, blah, blah, blah. So they went straight away into the massive, So that was quite very, very hard. So I remember calling my dad and saying, well, Dad, I'm gutted, look what happened. I finally managed to get into F1 and these guys are shutting down the program. So I have no job anymore. And I remember him telling me that, well, what do you want to do? You want to stay in F1 or not? Yeah, I want to. Well, then you have to look for other option, go for another team, and did exactly what you did at before F1, but within the existing Formula One team, contact them and see what happened. And at the same time, again, you see there is a bit of part of luck as well, an opportunity. So Mike Gascoigne, that used to be the technical director in Toyota for many years, he he was about to set up a team in UK, which was actually, he later got called Caterham, but at the time he was called Lotus Racing. That was 2010, and that was
That
with
confusing
Tony
period.
Fernandez, the AirAsia boss, basically. And what he did, and he was very clever for that, Mike, he basically took the pub of the hotel of Cologne Airport as his office, and then he was welcoming all the people from Toyota that got made redundant. You know what I mean? So I remember this queue of people outside this pub in this hotel in Cologne Airport, and the interview was he was with a beer, pint of beer, and he said, "Okay, you have 10 minutes. Talk to me." That was the interview.
Wow.
And people like this. And for Mike, was a great opportunity, because imagine you create a Formula One team, and at the same time,
Yeah.
team of the size of Toyota made 800 people redundant. So what happened is that the entire race team of Toyota went to work with him, from the chief engineer, the race engineer, the performance engineer, the drivers, because even Jarno went from Toyota to Lotus Racing at the time. So
Yeah.
we all translated into Norwich, and that was my my next step, basically, in UK, my new life in UK.
In Norwich.
Yeah, close to Norwich. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's where I was living, in Norwich. Yeah.
So when you went to it was Lotus, right? When you went to Lotus, you went there as a performance engineer.
Yes, I was still performance engineer. Yeah.
Is that where you worked with Jarno
Yes.
Trulli?
Yeah.
Yeah. I actually can't. It was so complicated, everything that happened with that team. I can't quite remember exactly what happened. But that was a period where there were two Lotuses, right? And then there
Well,
was a Caterham and some other
the
stuff.
funny part is that I did. So this team was called Lotus Racing at the beginning, but they had nothing to do with Lotus, basically.
Yeah.
And then they became 1 year after, they became Caterham. Okay.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
myself, so I stayed 1 year with Lotus Racing in Norwich, and I went to Enstone, which at the time was called Lotus Grand Prix or something like this. So 2011 was a funny year where you had two teams called Lotus. You had Lotus
Yes.
Racing and Lotus GP, basically.
Yes.
And
So just for the viewers, Enstone is Tolman, Benetton,
Renault, Lotus, and
now Alpine.
Renault again. Yeah, and now Alpine. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so that was a point at which you went across to Enstone, and as
Exactly.
it was then Lotus, which was the black car, right? It was black at that point.
Yes, black and gold. Yeah.
Yes, the
gold
Jenny or Jenny, whatever the sponsorship was on the side with
Jenny.
the logo.
Yeah, and that's when we had. So the first year I was there, we had Petrov and Nick Heidfeld, because they had signed Kubica, if you remember. The lineup should have been Robert and Petrov, but then Robert got his rally accident, so he could not start the season effectively. So they had to find Nick Heidfeld as a replacement driver, basically, for this season. We also had I don't know if you remember the forward exhaust car. That was the only car that had this forward exhaust. That was a very clever engineering.
Oh no, I don't remember that. That could be a Driver 61 video.
You don't remember the forward exhaust? That was a great invention. No. So basically, the exhaust going up towards the front and then blowing at the beginning of the floor leading edge, basically.
I do remember. Amazing. Yeah. So it was energizing the floor, but from the front, not just from the
front,
middle and
not
back.
just from the top of the back. Very, very clever invention. So yeah, and then I spent 6 years in Enstone across the different engine, different owner, different let's say ownership of the teams, basically.
Different finance.
And this is in Enstone where I switched from performance to race engineer. So that was an important step of my career, because in 2015 I finally got offered, after pushing, because obviously I had been performance engineer for many years, and the role was starting to be a bit difficult for me because I had done it for so many years. So I was pushing the next step. And that's another lesson in Formula One. So never assume that your boss knows what you want to do. you always have to remind him what you want to do. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
And in
And what did
15,
that feel like when you'd finally become a race engineer in Formula One?
but that was a dream that finally I managed to achieve. You imagine, since nearly 10 years old, I wanted to become a race engineer, and in 15, I finally managed to get it. So for me, it was absolutely amazing. I was so happy, and the car was quick as well. We had the Mercedes engine. We had switched this year to Mercedes. I was with Romain, Grosjean, his main race engineer. Let's say we did a podium in Spa. But yeah, he was absolutely amazing.
And so yeah, you worked with Roman that first year. You'd become a race engineer. That must have been fantastic, and actually such a massive achievement after, how old were you at that point? Like, how long had it taken since that first job at Prema to get to F1 and the race engineer?
10 years, more or less.
Yeah.
10 years.
Yeah. So I think that's an important lesson for people thinking, oh, I'm going to go straight into Formula One and do that. You can see there were trials and tribulations, and Julien, you're a very focused person. It still takes a decade to get there, with some luck along the way, some problems along the way. It could have gone very differently, but you kind of carried on and you made it happen in those 10 years. So that must have felt absolutely amazing.
Absolutely. No, I was super happy at the time. I remember again calling my dad and saying, finally, I made it, and I achieved my dream. And it was an achievement of all, a reward of all the effort, all the work put in place for all these years. You know what I mean? And I was more than ready, because I had been probably performance engineer for a bit too long. So I was more than ready to do well in a job, and actually the transition was completely seamless. So I went from one day to another into this new role, and it went really well from the beginning.
And it was quite lucky timing as well, right? Because like you said, the car was pretty quick. You worked with Romain, who was really quick, and then you worked with Kimi Räikkönen. So it was like it turned into an absolutely golden opportunity.
Absolutely. So the Kimi's day, I was perfect with him. That was 2012 and 13. So that's when he won in Abu Dhabi. When he won in Australia, actually, not many people remember that he won the last race in Abu Dhabi in 2012, but also the first race in Melbourne in 2013.
That's because he was more polite on the radio the following year.
No, he wasn't. He was actually quite difficult here, 2012, and he had huge financial issues. And basically he had a system that he was paid he had a bonus per point, and this year he did over 300 points, so he nearly crippled the team, basically. So the team could not pay him anymore. So he said, okay, pay the guys, I can wait. So he waited until a certain point where I think he was Korea. I remember eating with him in the hospitality of the team, and then the boss arrived and said, how are you? And he said something like, where is my money? You know what I mean? But out of the blue completely, with his typical being so straight, and that's where he started to go not so well, basically. So he was kind to be quiet for so long, because he knew that it was more important the team to be paid than himself. But like everybody, you want to be paid for what you're doing, you know what I mean? So you can wait up to a certain point, and then he all exploded at the end of 13. So I don't know if you remember, exactly. But he missed the last two races. We had to take Kovalainen as a driver. So he took as an excuse that he had a back issue or things like that, which was true also at the time. But the main thing is that he had a huge problem with the owner of the team at the time.
Yeah, it's very interesting. It's a bit off topic for this podcast, but it's like he took the risk on that deal, right? I presume it was more weighed on performance, and the deal's the deal, right? So yeah, all power to Kimi for pushing through that.
Absolutely.
And so Julien, from that point, what happened from there?
So then we were in 2000. So we had Kimi 2012, 2013. Then we had 2013 was the first introduction of the hybrid power units, and we had Renault engine, which was normal because we had Renault with the V8. So we kept Renault for 2014, and it turned out to be a complete disaster because they were unfortunately massively unprepared compared to Mercedes. So we had a terrible year. I remember testing in Bahrain, doing like 20 laps in 3 days because the engine kept breaking, basically. And so 14 was a terrible year. Then the owner decided to switch to Mercedes in 15. That's where I become race engineer. Sorry, then fantastic year with Romain. And then from there, Romain left to Haas. So they asked me to come with him. So I remember doing some interview with Haas. But at the time, the team was not existing. They were creating everything. So it was quite a big challenge for me to leave Enstone team to go to Haas. So I decided to stay where I was. And then I had Julien Palmer in 2016 as a race engineer. Despite the car being slow, that was also the first year that Renault fully took again the ownership of the team again, and became fully the major shareholder of the team. That was a difficult year because the car was not quick, and unfortunately, even how hard you can in F1, that's another lesson. But it's very difficult to, when you start the season so on the back foot, it's very difficult to go back up the ranks. So it was a very, very difficult year, 16. And despite the good work with Julien, the team wanted to change. They wanted to put some new structure in place for 17. So basically, I had to find another job, and I found another job in Sauber. So it means I had to move the family to Switzerland. So that was not an easy decision either, because we had just bought a house near Enstone. So as you can imagine, there is a lot of things in play. And then I stayed 5 years in Sauber, where I work again this time I step up. I was senior race engineer, so I was the most experienced race engineer in Sauber. So that was still the same role, but a bit more senior, a bit more like, teaching the other engineers, a bit more senior role. But overall, a very similar position. And over there, I work with Marcus Ericsson and Kimi, that was coming back from this year at Ferrari. So I did 3 years, and the last year of Kimi Räikkönen in F1 as a senior race engineer.
Wow, fantastic. So as a race engineer and senior race engineer, that was a good chunk of your career. With the senior race engineer, you're still going to all the races, I presume.
Yeah. It's basically the same role. It's just, when people, it's more mentoring role, a bit more mentoring. Right. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
So
I didn't know if it was more factory based or more advisory.
No. It was you were basically the same role, but yeah, you're mentoring a bit more the other engineers, let's say.
And like that all sounds fantastic. And I mean, working at that level it's an incredible achievement, and it must be absolutely fascinating. I would love to view that and experience it. But there's some downsides, right? The travel of just being involved with F1, especially for a long period of time, that must take its toll as well. And I think people looking into F1 just see the glamour, just see the boats at Monaco, etc. But actually, I traveled with racing as well. It's aeroplane, hotel, track, hotel, and then you come back. Yeah, how did you deal with kind of being on the road quite a lot, and how did it feel?
Well, I think when you're young and single, it doesn't really matter. When I started, I think we had 17 or 18 races, and now in F1 they have 24. So what people have to realize is that you don't get paid more when you have more race. You know what I mean? It doesn't work this way. You just work more. So as simple as that. So that's what people say. Why they complain? There's too many races, they can leave, but it's not that easy. You know what I mean? So I think it's nice when you are single and when you want to travel the world, even though, as you said, the world means mostly seeing airports and hotel because you don't have much time. to see anything else. The problem comes when you start to have a family with kids. Then it becomes very, very challenging. You need a very, your wife need to understand why you're doing that, because you're never home. You're literally
How
never
many
home.
days were you away, Julien? Like, what does that actually look like in practical terms? Like, how many days were you away from home, basically?
Over half the year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Because there is a
that's
race. A race weekend is 3 days, but for us, between the traveling and so on, it becomes 5. Then you have the days in the factory to do the reports, the analysis, and so on. So, and also that's part that people don't know, is that they believe you only go to race, but no. Sorry, you don't do only that. There is a huge part back in the factory where you have to report to the design office what you have done during the weekend. You have to do reports, you have to do analysis, preparation work for the following event. So that takes days and days as well. So it's a very demanding job with very long hours at the track. I remember when now there is the curfew in place, so they force people to leave the track at a certain time. But when I started, we didn't have curfew. So it was very common to do 48 hours in a row without even sleeping. You're just going back half an hour at the track at the hotel to have a shower and get changed. And then they realized, it's not sustainable. So we're going to introduce the curfew, which was all well and fine. But the initial curfew they put in place, it was like from 11 o'clock until 6 o'clock. That was still a long day, you know what I mean, at the track. So you need to be able, but you have what drives you is the passion. You know what I mean? You could not do this job if you are not passionate by what you're doing. And that's what drives all the people inside F1 to the same direction. You can't approach this job because yes, you get well paid, but then if you do the ratio of what you get paid and how many hours you're working a day, it's very, I'll give you an example. 16 hours during the day per day during race weekend was something quite common at the time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's nearly half the week of work in European country. You know, so
Yeah, exactly. You're working double time, right?
yeah, easily. Doing between 80 and 100 hours a week is very common in F1. You know what I mean? So you need to be ready to do that. Plus, is a very highly stressful and demanding job as well. You know what I mean? You're under pressure all the time. You're under pressure to perform. Performance is the key. And then in the job I had, it was very easy to see if I was doing well my job or not. You know what I mean? Then on top of that,
Yep.
you're on the radio. So when you have a driver like Kimi, you know you're going to be broadcasted live to the worldwide. So you have to think twice before every time you talking. But so yeah, so it's a fantastic job. It's amazing and it's very rewarding. But it's also a lot of hours, a lot of work, a lot of stress, and it's not very family friendly job at all.
And I think that's a great way to summarize it. I was going to try and bring it, but I didn't want to end on a negative note. It is a lot of travel, massive hours, lots of pressure. But it's, the best sport in the world with the best cars, the best drivers, really competitive, of course. And, it's making the hairs on the back of my neck stand up as I say that anyway. So it's, it's one of the best things that you can possibly do.
Absolutely.
I think, Julien, when we finish there, what's the one kind of, I know there's much more to it than this, but if you could bring it down to like a brief single focus for people looking to get into motorsport, what would be the advice that you give there?
Never give up and never let anyone telling you will not able to achieve it. You know what I mean? If that's your dream, that's your passion, that's what you want to achieve, never let anyone pulling you down and telling you will never get it. Because if you have focus, passion, resilience, you will make it.
Fantastic, Julien. Well, thank you very much for your time. That was absolutely excellent. If any of our viewers or listeners want to find out more about you and your business now as well, where should they go?
Well, they should go to jsc7engineering.com. So that's my new consulting business I've created since 2 years now. So some of you might have seen me on TV with Canal Plus or F1 TV. I do some presenting gigs. But my core business now is to help teams and structure to improve their process and their procedure, and I'm doing a lot of work with team like this, where I come there and basically I consult with them and I tell them you should do like this, like this, like this, and putting new procedure in place. And that's my core business at the moment. I'm doing also some recruitment, speaker gigs. So I have a lot of different. I have a bit my finger in many pies, which I love. Yeah, that's what I'm doing at the moment: consulting, engineering.
And Julien also has a fairly active LinkedIn as well. So I know lots of the viewers of this will be on LinkedIn. So check him out there. Julien, again, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. That was a fantastic chat. And yeah, let's catch up soon.
Thanks for having me.